Initially released on PCVR, Windlands 2 has made its way to MetaQuest. Is this good news? Is it worth the $24.99 asking price? Let's find out. I've never played original Windlands, but my understanding is that it was mostly a prototype for what we have here in Windlands 2. In any case, Windlands 2 is mainly a swinging game. You have two grappling hooks, one in each hand, but they don't grab onto anything like Spider-Man's webbing would. They only grab onto green parts of the environments, so swinging successfully does require more focus than it would for our favorite web slinger. Okay, but what's the game about, I hear you ask? Well, not much. You swing around in 3 different environments, either collecting objects for a couple of NPCs or defeating some enemies with your arrows. I hadn't mentioned that, had I? You have bows and arrows. You shoot arrows at the bad robots and the robotic bosses, all working for some bad guy that you encounter later on in the game. Okay, I'm being random. Let's get down to brass tacks. The best thing about Windlands 2, which isn't a huge surprise, since clearly this is the core foundation of the game, is the swinging mechanics. When you get used to it and you're doing it well, it feels great swinging from tree to tree. You can almost get into a zen-like flow state with the landscape whooshing past you and your arms getting into a good swinging rhythm. It feels great. The graphics are pleasant enough and work well within the limitations of the Quest platform. The frame rate was consistent throughout my playthrough, and I had no issues there. The soundtrack is similarly appropriate, if not particularly notable. The voice acting perhaps being weaker than it could have been. What's not so good? Well, when it comes to swinging, some limitations are imposed on you. As previously mentioned, you can only latch onto certain parts of the environment. Yes, this adds some challenge to a game sorely lacking any, more on that later, but it feels like an imposed limitation rather than a natural one, put into place not because it makes any sense, but to make a simple game a little more complicated. The environments, although not unattractive, are lifeless. Devoid of any animations or native fauna, they feel like unfinished game levels, a first draft of something that would work much better with some animated flourishes. There's also very little enemy variety. A flying serpent-like robotic creature, a couple of spaceships, a few sphere-like turrets. As with the rest of the game, there's not much to see here. Okay, your bow and arrow. Isn't it odd that this is only the second time I mentioned the bow and arrow, or archery at all, in a game that has this as your main and only weapon? That's because it feels unsubstantial. It feels weightless and ethereal, and although, yes, it feels good to land a shot on your enemy while you're swinging across the surrounding trees, it just lacks any oomph. I expect more from archery in VR. A good sound design, haptics as you pull back on an arrow, a satisfying whoop as it leaves your bow, and a solid sound as it strikes your target. Windlands does not satisfy on any of those metrics. The biggest issue with the game, and the reason it still feels like a glorified tech demo, is the absolute lack of stakes. Your grapple ropes have a fairly limited range, and that, along with the fact that you can't just grapple onto anything, means you'll be falling to your death quite a lot. The game's solution to this is that it doesn't matter if you die. There are many checkpoints, and dying just means you'll resurrect back at the last checkpoint. In fact, it's so low stake that one of your controller buttons is dedicated to resetting you back to the last checkpoint. Are you dead because one of the bosses just shot you? No problem, you resurrect while the damage you've caused does not reset. So you keep resurrecting until you kill the boss. So there you have it. Decent graphics, decent sound, decent but purposefully limited traversal mechanics, unsatisfying archery, poor enemy variety, and incredibly low stakes gameplay. And if you have any issues with motion sickness, and in case that hasn't become clear just by watching the gameplay footage, don't come anywhere near this. I myself had no issues, but I can imagine newer VR players won't be able to stand this for any length of time. So overall, it's hard to recommend. It could be fun for younger, easily frustrated players for whom the low stakes might be an advantage, but I can't imagine it being satisfying for anybody else. If you want to feel like Spider-Man, I'd suggest Resist or Jupiter Grad, two far better, much more fleshed out games. Overall, 5.5. Clone Saga. If you found this video useful, give it a like. If you want more content from our channel, remember to subscribe and set your alerts on. And we've recently added channel memberships. We don't want to hide any content behind paywall, but you will be informed about what we're currently playing and getting ready to review. And it's a great way to support the channel. Have a great day.